My name is Julianne Meyer, and I am the host of Own Your Wellness. And guess what? Today is my birthday. Can you believe it? I'm excited to be 44. It has been quite a ride, and I am happy to be here today because we have an amazing guest who is coming to us from England. And oh my gosh, I'm just so excited to talk to her. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a couple weeks now. Her name is Hartley Young. Let's bring her on. Hello, welcome.
Hi, Julie. How are you?
I am so happy that you're here spending my birthday with me. And I mean, especially because of the time difference. Oh my goodness.
Well, first of all, happy birthday. I love a birthday. I hope you're celebrating.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And then plus we're going to Boston tomorrow. So I'm excited about that.
Nice.
It's a trip that we've been planning for 2 years. And it's been a long time coming. So yay, I'm excited. But we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about you and with you. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about yourself and your own wellness journey.
Sure. So, well, as you said, I am Hartley Young, and I am currently speaking to you from London in the UK. And I would say we're finally in spring over here. The weather is always a little bit funny in the UK, but we've turned a corner, thank God. So most people know me as the creator and host of Crazy Sexy Food, which is actually I'm still trying to figure out what to call it, but I would call it a platform. It's a podcast, which I would say is what I'm most known for. It's also a YouTube channel, and it also has like social media presence. And I started Crazy Sexy Food because of a few reasons. First of all, I am like a huge watcher, avid watcher of food shows, as I'm sure a lot of people out there are. And by food shows, I don't mean like cooking shows. I do watch the cooking shows, but I'm talking about like the documentary style food shows, a bit like what the great Anthony Bourdain used to do. You know, he would travel around the world, meeting incredible people from different cultures, trying incredible cuisines. And I think it was actually watching a lot of his shows and then a lot of shows that we had on in the UK. And I was watching them and I thought, you know what? I mean, I'm going to put Anthony out of this because he's sort of like the messiah that no one can touch. And I am never, ever trying to sort of emulate him, but he really is like the best to have done it. And it's such a great loss that he unfortunately left us. But there was no young, cool females kind of fronting those sorts of shows, particularly in the UK is kind of what I'm talking about now. And I was just like, why? You know, I love my food and I'm happy to say that. I've spent years feeling shame for loving my food, perhaps too much, as some people may say. And so I just thought, you know what, I'm going to create something by myself. My husband works in the film and TV world. So I had access to a crew, to like cameras and sound people, which is always the most difficult part if you aren't or don't have anyone in your life, you know, that is connected to that, because it can be really expensive. And so we basically filmed a pilot. So this is all the way back in 2018, and we filmed a pilot that was all about street food culture in London, and I put it out onto YouTube 2 years later because my life was just a bit crazy. And the other half of my life is that actually I'm a photographer by trade. I've been a photographer for 11 years and it's been a wonderful career for me. I've got to shoot some incredible people, travel the world with it. You know, it's been amazing, but I don't see it as the rest of my life. I'd always wanted to get into like TV presenting, but it just never really happened for me in sort of like my earlier years, in like my early 20s. So anyway, back to Crazy Sexy Food. So I start this YouTube channel and I put it out. And then as I'm sort of starting to think about the next episode, I'm like, why don't I do a podcast? You know, I've just started listening to them. I know I'm really late in the game with them, but I just thought I would do it as a way to practice my interviewing skills. That was literally what I thought I would do. I thought, you know what, there's no harm in it. So I get this whole season together. I pre-record all of these interviews. I managed to submit it onto Apple Podcasts because there's a certain protocol you have to follow with podcasts. And just to give you that time frame, the first episode of the first season of the Crazy Sexy Food podcast came out the week before the UK went into lockdown because of COVID. So this is now 2020. Now, whether you want to call this a blessing or a curse, and I'm by no means trying to make anything good out of what's been just the most horrific few years. And I know that everyone has been affected in different ways. But suddenly, this is what I think happened. Suddenly, people were at home with nothing to do. I was obviously banging on about Crazy Sexy Food on Instagram at the time. Suddenly announced that I had a podcast, and literally the rest is history. I'm now about to finish season 6 of the podcast, which was, in 2 years, I've done a lot. Within its first season, it was in the top 10 in the UK. Yay. And, and here we are.
No, I love that. And, I just want to touch on the whole COVID thing. I love it when anybody can have or experience anything good and find the silver lining when things are not so good. So I want to celebrate that because I understand exactly what you're saying. And I felt that way too, but I've had so many blessings come out of this not so good time that I don't want to discount the good because what you focus on expands. So
no, and I do agree with you. I think that, listen, I was very badly affected by the pandemic because my bread and butter at the time was being a photographer, and I completely lost all of my jobs, and I didn't end up working for 18 months, which massively affected me mentally because I think that I had spent so many years creating a name for myself. And, it's difficult out there being self-employed on a good day, let alone trying to navigate it through a global pandemic. And it massively affected me. And I had some really, really tough moments, but I kept going with Crazy Sexy Food. And, I really do think the making of it was 100% during COVID, during lockdown, because one, I had nothing else to do. And it is the first thing, honestly, in my life that I have truly, truly believed in. And I got up every single day and I sat at my desk and I just worked on it. And here we are. I mean, I'm not finished yet, but we're getting somewhere with it.
No, I love that. So I just want to pop up your website really quick as well, too. And then people can go to the Apple, obviously, to watch it or listen to it. And then, so can you talk a little bit more about what it is? Because,
So I kind of explained a little bit about why I started the YouTube channel. So the podcast, how the format kind of works is that I sit down with a guest every week, a bit like what we're doing here. Now, the guests that I have on are usually quite well known within their industry. So they range from really high end, like Nile Rodgers, the guy who created some of the best music in the world, to one of my greatest heroes when I was a kid, which was Shaggy. And then down to kind of people who are just sort of doing great things in their field. Whether they still even be TV presenters, or I interviewed a really wonderful broadcaster here in the UK called Dan Saladino, who works for the BBC over here, and he wrote a book all about foods, different foods that are going to become extinct, which I thought was really interesting. So the idea and concept behind it, and I think also with the show as well, is at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who you are, what the color of your skin is, what your religion is, what your social standing is, what your gender is. We all have a common language, and that is food. And I'm so interested not only in people and just their life stories, but I'm interested in what people eat. I'm interested in what people ate when they were younger, what was put on the table. And suddenly this nostalgic conversation starts happening. And it's amazing to see people just open up. And they actually come out with things that they probably never spoken about in so long. When was the last time someone asked you, Julie, what were you eating when you were a child? Like, who was cooking? What was food important as a child? And it's just a really beautiful conversation. And we don't always speak about food, if it's someone that comes from an industry such as like Nile Rodgers, we spoke about his career, obviously, and obviously he's had an incredible career, but we kind of always bring it back to the food. And it's just and also it's not serious. It's just it's lighthearted. We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about the things that are going on in the world, because I need to step away from that as well. Right? we all need a break. And food makes me happy, so why not talk about it?
Exactly. Okay, so something that's really on my mind is I just recently discovered, having to do with my health, that I have a pretty serious iron overload in my bloodstream. So that means that I have to, among other things, change the way that I eat a little bit. But one of the cool things is I get to eat all the so-called bad foods that, like, I'm obsessed with cheese, for example. I love cheese, and that is on my to eat list now. So, because of the calcium. But I'm just so excited about that, because it just goes to show you that food is not bad or good. It just depends on, there's just so much more to it than that. So I love that you have a conversation about, what you ate as a child, for example.
But I think that's also, to do with conditioning. I know that, like, even the way that I was raised, I have to say, I'm very grateful for this, but in a really wonderful, loving, nourishing household. My mum was the primary cook. She was, feeding me really fresh food from the get-go, but she also educated me in food as she was cooking. So I sort of knew where my food was coming from. I knew how to make, not necessarily by myself, but I knew what she was doing while she was making dinner every night. And she always encouraged me to not only be in the kitchen with her, but also go and do the food shop, let's say, or sit down with her and look at cookery books, or, talk about food in whatever way. And I think that, unfortunately, we have been conditioned to think that some things are good or some things are bad, or this is right or this is wrong. And I'm quite frankly fed up with it, because we spend our lives, and especially women, always putting ourselves down. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm still guilty of it. It was just Easter, and yes, I was eating more chocolate than I'm probably used to. And there was a moment where I was like, oh my God, I shouldn't have eaten that. But why shouldn't have I eaten that? Who's saying that? I'm saying that to myself. No one else is saying that to me.
Yes. And
I'm not saying that I should do that every day. I'm saying, like, it's Easter, Hannah. It's okay.
Exactly. And there's a huge difference between I shouldn't have eaten that because I'm going to be sick later, as opposed to I shouldn't have eaten that because it's chocolate. Like,
well, no,
there's
exactly.
a big distinction.
Totally. And I think the other thing that I haven't mentioned about my childhood. So, as I said, I had this amazing, wonderful childhood. And and I'm thankful to my parents that I was, brought up in that environment. But the one thing that I massively struggled with, as I would say until I was really realizing it, I'd say from about the age of 7 or 8 until, honestly, about 18, I was quite overweight. I don't know if I was clinically obese, because I don't think I ever had that conversation. And I wouldn't say that I was, but I was aware that I was considerably larger than most of my friends. And I massively struggled with that. I had terrible confidence issues. I would cry myself to sleep every night because I didn't like the way that I looked. As I got into my teenage years, the boys never fancied me. I didn't feel pretty. I was wearing clothes that were much bigger than my friends. And it's not something that I still deal with today. I mean, I think I will always have that inherent, oh my gosh, I don't love the way that I look. I also don't know anyone that loves the way that they look. I do think that realistically, we're all going to have something about ourselves that we probably want to change. But I've come to a point in my life where I'm like, no one has ever outrightly said to me, you are unattractive, you are ugly, you are, I hate using the word fat, but you are fat. I've had like some very close people say to me, listen, maybe at the time, back in the day, maybe you should think about doing a bit, let's get some exercise in. I didn't exercise, I overate, I was greedy. Like I know why I looked the way I looked. I know what it was, but I loved my food. I still love my food. I exercise a lot and I eat in moderation the things that I really, really love, like pizzas and potato chips and chocolate.
Well, I like the idea of not giving it up, because we only live once in these bodies. So we might as well enjoy it as much as possible. And I've never been one for, eliminating things that I really enjoy, because especially with the way things are. And like you said, there's a difference between overindulging and having some of and enjoying it. Besides, after the first, few bites, it's not as tasty because you've already saturated your tongue and you've already got that flavor. And now the rest of it's more like chasing the dragon for that first taste again. So now I just love that idea though of, just eating that, but not feeling guilty about it either.
I mean, listen, I'm very much still a work in progress. I think I probably will be. I am not speaking as someone who has like figured it out, because I most certainly haven't. And, I still have my days where I'm like, are you just like, I mean, listen, I'll be honest, the weekend just gone, which was Easter weekend. I had a really bad eating day on one of those days. And I do remember lying in bed that night thinking, why did you do that? Well, then I have to sort of like break it down. Well, why did I do that? I went out for a really lovely lunch with my family. I ate a meal that I had been looking forward to all week. Yes, it was Easter. My husband gave me an Easter egg, like as a joke, because obviously I'm still a child and need an Easter egg. And like, and I sort of say to myself, like, Hannah, like, what do you want to do with that? Okay, you had a bad eating day. Tomorrow's a new day.
Exactly.
You're not gonna go and have that meal again tomorrow. You're not gonna probably eat as much chocolate tomorrow. You're actually going to the gym as well tomorrow. I'm not sitting here saying, well, if you want to eat badly, you've got to then get into the gym. That's just not necessarily. Listen, I'm not qualified to speak about what you're meant to do with your body. Obviously everyone's individual, but for me, the exercise is such a huge part of my life, and that's not because I'm trying to lose weight every single day. It's purely for my mental health first and foremost. Like, I need to be moving every day. It feels so good.
It does. There's this meme that I love, and it says, I run to burn off the crazy.
That as well. There we go. Why do you think I called it crazy, sexy food?
So I can appreciate that. Besides, any good thing that you do for yourself, it kind of has a ripple effect. You want to do more because it feels good and you're taking care of yourself. It's an act of self-love. And I'm not saying that eating the chocolate wasn't an act of self-love, because you were enjoying the holiday or spending time with your family. And that is just as important as the food, in my opinion. But like you said, you're not having the same day the next day. And I love that you were able to break it down. And I would say too, I want to thank you for sharing that, because a lot of people think, oh, I did it wrong, or I need to get to that place where I'm never going to feel guilty or bad about these choices again. But the odds of that are pretty slim.
Well, exactly. I also think as well, and I use this very lightly, this phrase, because I think it's a very overused phrase, but we need to be kind to ourselves. I need to be kind to Hannah, because we've gone through a hell of a few years, right? Listen, I know I put weight on during COVID. Like, it was what it was. I wasn't moving as much. I was probably eating a bit more because all sorts of emotions were going on. I did start baking a lot, because why wouldn't you? And like, I'm healthy, I'm happy. my family are around me. There's so much, and not to sort of make this a dull conversation, but there's so much awful things going on in the world. Like if this is what I'm worrying about, then, you know, I need to put my focus somewhere else, because my life is too short. My life is, honestly, this life is so short.
It really is. And it's kind of, it's fascinating how something like COVID, or even like for me, just getting this diagnosis really changes things, because it's like all of a sudden it becomes real, like how short it can be. And, you know, I don't know if you've lost anybody to COVID, but I did. And, you know, people that shouldn't die, you know, they were too young. They had so much life left and all this. And it's just kind of like, at the end of my life, am I going to feel guilty because I ate the chocolate egg? Like, that's such a waste of energy.
This is the thing, isn't it? And I do try and remind myself that, you know, at the end of the day, like, and I'm on my deathbed, will I really be thinking, God, I never got that flat stomach? Like, is that really what I'm going to be saying to myself? What I want to be saying to myself was, oh my God, you did so much with your life. You had so much fun. You lived life to the fullest. You traveled the world. You know, travel's really important for me. And you got to eat incredible food along the way. Are you kidding me?
Exactly. So what kind of, what would be like your favorite type of cuisine?
Oh gosh. Okay. So I can't just give you one. I'm getting serious now. I would have to say my top two would be Italian and Mexican. And I think what connects the two of them is that they're both big on fresh ingredients. And what I love about particularly Italian food, actually both of them, now I think about it, you literally could eat just like a tomato with olive oil and some bread, like really good tomato, really good olive oil. And that's a meal for some, like, you know what I mean? You go into like the hills in Tuscany in Italy, and that is literally a meal. I'm very happy with that. Same with Mexican food. You think about their use of avocado. I know that can become a guacamole, but avocado, some lemon juice, some olive oil, some salt and pepper. I mean, it's amazing. And I love spicy food. So that's why the Mexican goes in there, because I love the use of chilies. So I would say those two.
I used to live in Italy, so I definitely, I appreciate.
Lucky woman.
I know. And you know, it's funny too, because when I moved back to the States and people talk about how much they love Italian food, I'm like, you haven't really.
You know what's funny? I actually interviewed an Italian, I think he was Italian born, but he's half Italian, or he is Italian. He's a musician here in the UK. His name's Jack Savaretti. Amazing singer. I actually just went to his concert as well. He's been on tour. And we were talking about this, and I said something really controversial, and I sort of made a disclaimer at the beginning. I said, listen, I don't want to offend anyone. I don't need people coming into my DMs to like start trolling me about this, but I'm going to make a statement that I really sort of stand by, which was that I don't think there's mind-blowing Italian food in London. I'm just going to say London because I haven't found Italian food out of London really. And he actually agreed with me, which I was like, oh, thank God for that. I was like, oh, here we go. Like, that's not to say there are some amazing Italian restaurants in London, but
exactly,
they're just really not like hitting the marker. It's not there.
Italian. No, I mean, and I'm going to say the same thing, especially in the US. There's some really good American Italian restaurants that I thoroughly enjoy, and I think it's phenomenal quality and food, but it's just not Italian to me. No.
But you guys do have that sort of like, you've kind of created that American Italian cuisine in a way, because I used to live in New York in my 20s, and I used to eat a lot of food that was sort of deemed Italian, but I'm not sure. Originated from Italy? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I lived in Italy. I'm sorry, Italy. I did live there too, but I lived in New York City too for quite a long time. And, you know, especially when I moved back, because I lived in Italy, or I lived in New York first, then I moved to Italy, then I came back. And I will say that whenever I would test a restaurant out, I would try a really simple dish, just basically something like a spaghetti of sorts. And I'm like, okay, this is good, or this is, and you could tell by the ingredients. It's really about the ingredients. And you can't necessarily get the same thing in the United States as you can in Italy. It's just not the same. And it is what it is, but it doesn't mean it's not good. It's just not Italian to me.
That's so funny you say that. Just quoting another guest of mine who, funnily enough, is a very well-known Italian chef here in the UK. He's probably one of the most well-known. His name is Francesco Mazze. And he said, quoting what you've just said about choosing the most simplest dish, because I agree with you, because if you can't make a good pasta, then I don't know like what the point is in trying something else. But he said that when he's hiring chefs into his kitchen, he gets them to make a spaghetti with tomato sauce. And if they can't do that, then they shouldn't be in an Italian kitchen. It's kind of like, I believe, I also might have this completely wrong. I don't know why I'm using his name, but I do remember watching something years ago with Gordon Ramsay, where I think that when he was hiring chefs into his kitchens, he would get them to make an omelette. Because kind of an omelette is kind of seen as the most simplest meal you can make with eggs. Actually, an omelette is very difficult, I think, to make a really good omelette, because everyone has their different ways. And so that was their test. If they can make a good omelette, then they're worthy of kind of like getting to the next stage. And I quite like that, because there's no point in me getting you, if I was a chef, to like make something really complicated. I need to see that you can make something really simple.
Exactly. And it needs to be flavorful, because you can't, I mean, that was really, I'm like, okay. And I would be surprised at some of the places where I would find some really good Italian food, because I was thinking, oh, this place is going to be crap. But, or especially in the United States, they make these, they Americanize everything. It's just, I'm not saying it's not good. And I love when people put their own spin on things, but it's funny when they call it Italian, for example, or even Americans calling themselves Italians. I'm like, you are not Italian. You are American with Italian heritage. There's a huge difference. But that's my rant, and it's always been my rant ever since I lived there.
I'm actually off to Italy next week, so I'll be reporting back on some of that good pasta.
It is. It's phenomenal. And, living there, it's just everything's so fresh. That's what makes a huge difference too. It's so fresh. And I mean, when I moved there, I moved from New York, so I walked a lot. I was active, and I ate supposedly healthy food. And then when I moved to Italy, and I was eating all this stuff that in America they call bad carbs and bad, like pizza and pasta and all that, I lost weight, and I was like the thinnest I'd ever been.
Do you know what's funny? So touching on actually the whole wellness thing, a couple of years ago, I went to go see a nutritionist. I was kind of suffering from like excessive bloating. I wasn't quite sure what was going on. And I just wanted to, I don't always take the holistic method, but it was something that I wanted to try out. She'd been recommended, and I had an amazing experience with her, and I sort of saw her on and off for a year, and she really sorted me out. Anyway, we were talking, very similar conversation to what we were just talking about how we always shame ourselves with like the foods that we love. So the food that I love more than anything in the world, which will always be my final meal or will be included in it, is pizza. Like I love a really good pizza. And I'm talking to this nutritionist, and I'm saying, basically, I've just got to stop eating all this food for the next like 6 months, because, I'm not feeling great. And maybe I do need to lose a little bit of weight. I just don't know. And she's like, Hannah, she's like, she's like, where is your favorite pizza? In London. So I tell her where my favorite pizza is in London. And she'd heard of it. She said, Hannah, that's a really good pizza. That dough is made fresh on site. Yes. That tomato sauce is made fresh on site. The cheese has been brought in from Italy. She said, Hannah, if you want to have a pizza once a week, go and have a pizza once a week. And because I didn't have any issues with like gluten. That wasn't the issue. I wasn't celiac or anything like that. So it wasn't that I couldn't eat it. She said, in fact, I'm not telling you that to suggest it. I'm saying I want you to. I want you to go and have that pizza once a week if you want it. It is not going to alter the way that how much you weigh, how you look, but you know what it is going to do? It's going to make you feel happy.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my gosh, I mean, you don't have to ask me twice. Sure, I'll go do it. And interestingly enough, you know, obviously there were other components involved in sort of what program she put me on, and she didn't put me on a diet. It wasn't about that. It was just slight alterations in how I was eating and whatnot. And honestly, I've never been happier. I've never felt healthier. I may have lost a little bit of weight, but that wasn't really the ultimate goal. And I still got to eat pizza.
Yeah, I love that.
Winning.
Exactly. On that note, we are going to go to commercial break. We'll be right back, okay? All right, as I mentioned, it is time for those commercials. But before we go, I want to say hello to everyone who is watching us live. You are always appreciated, but we'll be right back after these messages.
Are you someone who is struggling to move forward because you suffered a loss? Maybe you're even finding it difficult to complete the most basic tasks. Are you looking for a way to start enjoying life again without feeling guilty or the resistance to do so? Spiritual life coach Sarah Stockham saw a need for people who haven't learned how to grieve without putting their entire lives on pause. And so she created a program that solves this issue called Choosing Life Right Now. This program is simple and you can do it on your own. If you are ready to learn how to feel your grief while still being able to smile, to honor the sacredness of what took place as a loss, and yet still continue to live with joy, and if you'd like to take care of your whole being with grace and love, then I'd like to invite you to experience her new program called Choosing Life Right Now. Sarah is currently offering her program for the promotional price of $77, but it won't stay at this price for long. To learn more, check out her website. The address is on the screen.
When drug or alcohol addiction take over, things begin to disappear. Your friends, your family, and eventually, you. Recommended by Dr. Phil, New Method Wellness can help get your life back with individualized treatment plans for dual diagnosis clients. New Method Wellness provides the most highly credentialed treatment in a safe and welcome environment. Call New Method Wellness for your free consultation and ask about our national accreditations. Together, we can put the pieces back together.
Welcome back, everyone. If you're just joining us now, my name is Julianne Meyer, and I am the host of Own Your Wellness. And today's special guest is Hannah Harley Young. Let's bring her back. Hello.
Hi.
I was like, so speaking of you, I know another good way to reach out to you would be via Instagram. This is one of your handles, as they say. What can people find here on your Instagram?
So this is the Crazy Sexy Food channel, I guess, the Instagram platform. On there, you will find a lot of information about the podcast. You will find fabulous photos of the food that I'm eating, of the food that I'm making, some of the fabulous places I get to go. I'm not massively, no, let me rephrase that. I love a good fine dining experience, but I'll be honest with you, I'd say that my palate has changed over the years, and I'm just into like good food. I like street food. I love trying new cuisines. It doesn't need to be all sort of like starched tablecloths and, like the services when they're pulling up the silver sort of covers and whatnot. But yeah, there's like an array of things. And then on my personal Instagram, which is Hannah Harley, that's just sort of my personal life. So I need to start posting more on that. Actually, I do post. I need to start just doing more. It's if I travel, I'll put up pictures from that.
Oh, fun.
And yeah.
So people get to know you more on this one. Okay, cool.
And I do try and sort of show myself on crazy, sexy food as well, because I think, I have really big plans for the future, and I don't just see this as sort of a podcast that will just keep going and going. I don't see this as a show that will just sort of stay on YouTube. I really believe that it has the capacity to go further than that. And I mean, not that let's not like undermine YouTube. YouTube is like a serious monster. It's amazing. But I have lots of plans and ideas of what I want to do with it. So yeah, this is just the beginning, I'd say.
I love that. I love it just the beginning, because here's the thing: if it doesn't grow, change, expand, then it gets boring and stale and dies. So it can't.
So true. Do you know what I always mark? So I've been a photographer for 11 years. I still kind of do it. I do it. I just don't talk about it as much because I'm really trying to grow this new business. Yeah. And I just don't want the message to get diluted too much. So the people that employ me as a photographer, my returning clients, they know me, they come back. That's great. But when something doesn't start, like if something doesn't challenge you, that's when I need to like sit down with myself. And the way that I kind of gauge it is if I start getting nervous, if my heart starts going before either a podcast recording and I'm feeling a bit like apprehensive, or I don't know, I'm starting to, film a new episode, and just the thought of the next day being with the crew and sort of, being in front of camera and, giving the best that you can. That stuff in the best way gets my heart going. If my heart isn't going, that means I'm not being challenged enough. And I don't just want to lay stagnant my whole life. I need to feel that adrenaline. That's what gets me going.
I completely appreciate that, because when you start going, tomorrow I got to do this, then it's time to expand. It's time to grow. It's time to, just make that, like you said, that nervous feeling. It's not a bad thing.
No.
I mentioned that I lived in Italy, and the thing is I was slightly uncomfortable all of the time. And it was probably the best time of my life. Yeah, granted, I lived there and it was Italy, but I also lived there. So it wasn't vacation. There's a huge difference. People assume like that living in a foreign country, they assume it's like a vacation. It's not. It's everyday living. I worked. I did everything that you would do in, say, Boston, for example. So, the thing is when I first moved back to New York, I couldn't figure out what was missing. And it was that constant, slightly uncomfortable feeling, because I just went right back into my old habits and like, okay, instead of being uncomfortable, I'll just go watch TV, for example.
Do you know what's funny? And sort of touching back on what I mentioned about how COVID affected me and my career and also and financially, is that I realized something about myself. When my work dried up, and I literally remember this day like it was yesterday, I think it was like the 8th of March, 2020. I'm not joking. I had about 10 different phone calls from the people behind all the jobs that I had lined up for the next, let's say, 2 months or so. And all of them cancelled. And I went into this absolute out of control spiral of what is happening. Because at the time, if we all take ourselves back then, I thought, oh, this is going to last a month or so and we'll be back on track, And then I took it personally at first. I thought, oh my God, why is everyone canceling me? Because I'm hearing from other people that they're still working, because there was still that weird thing where things were happening, things weren't happening. People didn't know what was going on. Some people still don't know what's going on in this country, but anyway, we're not going to get too deep with that. But it took me to a point that I never wanted to be at, which was that let me sort of say this before people start jumping to conclusions of what I'm about to say. Making money is important for me, not because it means that I can go and buy nice things or go to nice places. It's got nothing to do with that. Financial security has been important for me. Mm-hmm. And I think that being self-employed, I've been self-employed my entire life. I left university and I became a photographer. I've never actually been employed. So I don't know what it feels like to know that I've got the income coming in every month, regardless of how much I work, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So every time I got a job the past 11 years, that's just me banking money. That's the only way. So the amount of things I've had to sacrifice in my life, not show up to people's birthdays, not go on holidays with friends, last minute cancel on people because jobs come in. And obviously there have been times where, it's like, okay, I'm actually going to do the plan that I already had because maybe it was really important or, whatever the reasoning. But my career has always come first. And so suddenly I was put in a position where that was so out of my control. There was no money. There was no job. There was no camera to pick up, to go anywhere. And that's what made me spiral. But now I'm out of the darkness of sort of what that was. And I am embarking on this new career, and it is a risk. Yeah. Of course, but if I don't do this, I will regret it for the rest of my life, because I felt the thing that I never wanted to feel, which was to not earn. I'm fiercely independent. That's why I need to be financially secure. I'm fiercely independent. I try and do everything myself. I'm not here for handouts. I'm not here for people to look after me. I do it all myself. And so this was like a long-winded sort of commentary, but I think that the taking risk thing is so important in life. And especially, if it's in your control, great. But sometimes it isn't in your control.
Yeah. And even things that feel like they're in your control, often it's an illusion.
Listen, if that isn't anything that anyone's learned over the past year, we're not in control.
Exactly.
We're really not.
And, I want to say something about money. Next to air, it's pretty important.
Listen, it is important. I do just think that maybe there could be some people out there who are, it's not about the superficial level of it. It's for me to know that I have money in my account to be able to feed myself, to clothe myself, to whatever it is that there might be, who knows? I haven't said if anyone's financially dependent on me. The point is that was where I felt secure.
Yeah. And
I didn't have that for 18 months. And it wasn't a nice feeling for me. Anyway. That was my little moment.
Yeah, no, and I'm so glad you shared that too, because, I worked at a gym. I'm also a personal trainer, and I worked at a gym, and I remember the day I lost my job. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? What am I going to do? Yes, I can collect unemployment. Fabulous. But what am I going to do? Yeah. Because even if I wanted to be a bum and just, live off the system and not create something new for myself, at some point, what am I going to do? Everything changes. And it's just kind of fascinating when you kind of are put, like this life change that you probably were maybe a little scared to make. But now all of a sudden you have the opportunity because that's really, that's what happened with me. So I appreciate that, you're going for it.
Yeah. I mean, listen, for me, it's now or never.
Yeah.
And I'm not doing this. I didn't start Creating Sexy Food for anyone else but myself. I do it because I love it. Tomorrow, my sponsors could cancel, this could cancel, everything could stop. I'll still do the podcast because I love it. I'll still make the shows because I love it. And I think anything that anyone puts their mind to, their heart to, if they're starting a business, whatever it is, it's not even to do with business. If you're not doing it for yourself, then I don't know where the longevity in that is. Like, I don't know.
Exactly. And here's the thing. If, we spend most of our time of our life, like our day working, if you're not enjoying that, at least on some level or most of the time,
yeah.
How well of a life have you lived,
Well, yeah. And listen, I'm also mindful that we all need to, I've done a lot of things that I don't want to do, too. But you have to, like, that's just life, right?
Yeah.
Sorry. Like,
it
is. And, there are, I think that it's a privilege to be able to do what you love. I really do, because there are a lot of people, for whatever reasons, whether it be financially, circumstances, whatever it might be, confidence, whatever it is, that who aren't doing what they love. And, that can be really difficult.
It is.
So, and I am very mindful of that. And I do feel very lucky that I'm in a position that I have been able to kind of make that jump. I still haven't fully made the jump yet, but
well, a lot of the times, my cousin Darcy, who's amazing, and she has this amazing summit that's coming up soon. It's the Metaphysically Fit Summit, and she calls, like, my little side hustles and things just my Starbucks job, because sometimes you've got to fund the dream. And sometimes, like you said, you've got to do things you don't necessarily want to do. And it doesn't necessarily look the way you want it to look. But ultimately, if you can find joy in what you're doing while you're doing it, or as my dad would say, sometimes your job funds the rest of your life. And that's where you really enjoy, whatever it is. Maybe it's family, maybe it's, traveling, maybe whatever the case may be. But I don't care who you are. I think it's super important to find some sort of outlet, some sort of fun, some enjoyment, because at the end of your life, I want everyone to be like, wow, what a ride.
Totally. I also think we live in a world now where you don't need to do the same career the rest of your life. You don't. Sorry to sound like a millennial or whatever, but like a lot of my friends who are like in the creative industries are not just one like thing. Like they have like 3 different jobs, 3 different careers going on. That's so much fun. That sounds great to me. Listen, I fully understand that there are careers out there that, you need to have kind of like made a decision by the time you left high school, whether it's to become a lawyer, a doctor, a scientist, whatever it might be. I get that. But I knew that was never the route for me. That was never, actually, funnily enough, my absolute dream job. Had I been better at the sciences at school, I would have loved to have been a plastic surgeon.
Really?
Because I would have loved it. Not just because I wanted to like do like implants and stuff, but like to help people, whether they've been disfigured from accidents or, things like that. And it's also weirdly quite creative in the medical world. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I would have loved to have done something like that. And, but in my next life.
I like that you mentioned that in particular, because I feel like plastic surgeons get a bad rap too. And ultimately, if you're helping somebody feel better about themselves, whether or not you agree with that person's choices, who am I to say?
Exactly. Oh my gosh, I could talk about that till the cows come home. Honestly, I mean, I don't need to agree with anything that anyone does in their life. Just if that makes you happy, that's fine by me. It's not my face. It's not my body. Cool. I might do things that someone else might not agree with, but you know what?
Exactly. No, I really like that idea though of live and let live.
Yeah.
Even when it comes to food choices, there's people that are morbidly obese, and I know it's not as simple as put down the fork or pick up the blah, blah, blah. Nobody gets to that size without it being some sort of an underlying issue. And I think that, we need to be a little more compassionate towards people in general. It's not just a weight thing. I mean, there's something that is going on. I know about me and my emotional eating. Oh my goodness. Wow. It can sometimes get out of control. So, I just think that live and let live. And whether it's eating different foods, whether it's picking, people that, as your significant other that not everybody agrees with, or plastic surgery.
It's funny because you spoke about the fact that you've got too much iron in your body. I actually am the complete opposite. I have little iron in my body. So I have to take I've been taking iron supplements for the past 10 years or something. But I also recently just found out that I have really severe low quantities of protein in my body. So suddenly I'm now having to up my protein. Yeah. So that I never even thought that I'd ever have an issue like that. So I'm now doing things I'm doing protein shakes a few times a week, and I'm quite mindful about how much meat I eat. So I'm obviously being a little bit careful about just getting it from that source. But so sort of turning it back on the tables. It's interesting.
No. It is interesting. And I think that those two things, tend to go in sync a lot of the times, because I have too much protein in my body. So it's kind of, it's bizarre.
That's so interesting. God, I basically need what you have.
I know. Can I somehow, maybe I should send you some blood and then.
Please. Maybe my hair will finally grow better. That would be nice.
Well, it's interesting too, because you and I, even though we're on opposite ends of the spectrum, our symptoms are actually the same. So it's kind of, except for the fact that if mine were to keep going, I would end up with diabetes, heart disease, and I don't know if that's the same for the lack of, but for too much, it actually leads to organ failure and things like that. Yeah, I'm nowhere near that, so it's not anything I need to.
I have heard that actually too much iron is quite dangerous for you, and also too much protein as well. I don't know what the real major medical complications are with iron. Obviously, you then become anemic. I'm actually not anemic, which is bizarre, but it's just I think lack of iron, because iron is really good for your hair, your skin, your nails, your energy levels, and so that's just me.
Your body needs it. It needs it to process, and even getting the oxygen around and everything.
Exactly.
It's important. Iron is definitely important. We are almost out of time. We've got about 2 or 3 minutes left. Is there anything that you'd love to share with the audience that maybe you haven't shared already, or you can always reiterate something if you'd like?
Well, first of all, I would absolutely love everybody to tune into the podcast. There is 6 seasons worth of material on there, and I'm sure that you will find something on there that you will love. There's something on there for everyone. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing would be to go onto my website, which is at the bottom of the screen. Check out all of the videos that I've created. They are on the YouTube channel, but the website is kind of the hub. So you can find all of the podcast episodes. You can find all of the YouTube episodes. You can find out all about me, who I am, what I do, why I've started Crazy Sexy Food. And, contact me if you've got something to say, come talk to me. I am coming to the end of season 6 of the podcast, but there is going to be a new season that's going to be starting in June, which is super, super exciting. And I've got some other really exciting things happening this summer, but I'm not allowed to say them. So you've got to follow me on Instagram to find out.
Exactly. Keep in touch. And I've actually obviously been to your website. It is fascinating. So for those of you, it's definitely worth a look. And you have such beautiful pictures too, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I was like, woo, there's a lot. So also, I want to mention Instagram again, as well as your more personal one, which I always find more entertaining, because I'm just like, who is this person?
That's the real, that one is the real Hannah. No, I'm real on all of them. That's the one thing. Someone asked me the other day, they said, the girl that presents the podcast and is on the show, is that the Hannah that like your husband sees or your family see? And I said 100%. I can't be anything but what you see is what you get.
Oh, and that's amazing.
I'm fun. You can, I'm a good laugh.
No, I like that. I like that you are what you see, and there's no other person.
No, otherwise then I'd be an actress, and I don't want to be an actress. That's an industry I definitely can't tackle.
Well, Hannah, that is all the time that we have for today. I just want to say thank you so much for sharing my birthday with me and being on the show.
Happy birthday. And thank you so much for having me. This was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. And that is all of the time that we have for today. I'm going to go out and I'm going to celebrate with Drew my birthday. So thank you for sharing it with me as well. And until next time, we'll see you guys next week and enjoy your weekend.